Okay. All right. I think we're coming online here. Welcome to the Small Scale Life Podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 3, and today we're going to talk about the new Tom Hardy show called Taboo. I'm your host, Tom. Small Scale Life is a weekly podcast and blog dedicated to developing a sustainable life through gardening, healthy living, frugal living, and having adventures along the way. We always strive to learn, do, and grow. So, what the heck am I doing talking about a TV show? Why am I talking about this stuff? Well, I'm trying something new today. And this is, I think, try number 4. It's the technology, the technologies. I'm simulcasting on YouTube and trying out the live streaming feature on YouTube. And I've done this episode now a couple times, and I'm just trying to figure out how it works. So I think I'm getting it figured out. The last time I did it, it was great, except there was an echo, and I think I had the laptop picking up sound and the soundboard picking up sound. So there was just it was echoey, but I think I've got it figured out. Next, I'm talking about a TV show. How in the world am I talking about a TV show when the podcast and the blog are all about gardening, healthy living, frugal living, and okay, adventures? Yes, this is an adventure. Um, I I find it interesting. This show interesting. I'm a history buff, and the time period that it's set in, it's all about adventures. We have the new world, we have areas of the world that are unexplored, and there's some mystical twist to this. So it's an adventure, it's a drama, right? So it's just fun, and it's a chance for me to expand my horizons and try something new. If you know me, you know that I don't care about celebrities. I don't care about the Hollywood shenanigans and what's going on out there. I don't even watch that much TV, frankly. I'm down to The Walking Dead. I see a little bit of the, what is it, the Fixer Upper with Chip and Joanna Games when my wife has it on. I try to keep busy, but I saw this one pop up, and I'm kind of a Tom Hardy fan. I reviewed The Revenant when that came out last year, and that's up on smallscalelife.com. And I also, we like Bane. Who doesn't like Bane, right? I was born in the darkness, molded by it. So I like Tom Hardy, and this popped up. It looked kind of interesting, so I decided to watch it and do a little podcast about it. And hey, test out the equipment too. So let's talk a little bit about episode 1, Shovels and Keys. So Taboo debuted on the 10th, and the second episode is coming out tomorrow here in the U.S. I think they're a little ahead of us in Britain. I think they're a couple days ahead of us. And they've already seen season 2 or episode 2, so they're ahead of the game. And it also means that clips are leaking out on YouTube. But I'm just focusing on episode 1. So what's the gist of the show? What's it all about? Well, it's set in London in 1814, and Tom Hardy's character, named James Keziah Delaney, returns from Africa after being there for 10 years. Everyone thought he was dead, but he makes a surprise appearance and will assume his father's estate and shipping company. And this is to much chagrin of a number of people in his world, including his brother-in-law, the East India Company, and others, the family attorney, and others that we have not yet met. So there's a lot of intrigue up front. There was a lot of, it seems, as we'll talk about, there's a lot of unfinished business in the family. So there's going to be a lot going on in this show. Now, let's talk about the characters. We have, and we'll kind of run through them here. There's kind of 2 houses that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the Delaneys and their accomplices, and then I'll talk about the East India Company lords, I call them. So the characters, we have Horace Delaney, who is the father, and he is dead. He is assumed room temperature. We have James Keziah Delaney, who's Tom Hardy, and that's the son, of course. We have Zilpha Gary. She is James Delaney's half sister. And then we have Thorn Gary. He is the brother-in-law who doesn't care much that James Delaney showed up out of the mist. We have Brace, who is the family butler, was Horace Delaney's butler and confidant, and also served as kind of an older brother for James Delaney. So that's kind of the immediate family. We haven't met the mother, James Keziah's Delaney's mother. We have not met Zilpha's mother yet, but I think she'll show up in episode 2. Other people in their sphere of influence, we have an old man who is taking care of James Delaney's son or brother. We don't know yet. It's a Delaney child, and this old man's been caring for him for 10 years. And we also have Helga von Hinton, who is a local madam, who moved into the Delaney Shipping Company warehouse, and also James Delaney lost his virginity to her. Then we have Thoit, who is the Delaney lawyer. So that's in the house of Delaney, shall we say, at least relationships and family. We also have the East India Company, and they have a number of people of the lords that are associated here. First and most notable is Sir Stuart Strange. He's the chairman of the East India Company, and if you have watched other shows, he was also the Governor Swan from the Pirates of the Caribbean. So he was the governor, and plays a great British aristocrat from that era. We also have some lesser kind of manager type people. We have Pettifer. He is the head of the Africa desk. We have Appleby, who's the East India Company. He has some position there. We have Wilton. He's the head of records, and he looks. All these guys look quintessential British aristocratic. So good job casting there. We have another person that's part of their group, and that's Godfrey. He's a minute taker, and I bring it up because my son pointed this out to me as we watched it. There's something about him that James Delaney, when he's meeting with the East India Company, he's talking and kind of looking each one of the lords in their soul, and then he kind of pauses on that minute taker guy and really kind of squints his eyes, and he's seeing something there, and I'm not sure what that is, and we'll find out hopefully as the show progresses. So those are the main characters that were introduced. There's quite a few. There's a lot of them right off the bat. A basic plot, Horace Delaney's dead, and his estate has fallen on hard times. He does own a very strategic piece of land that is right near Vancouver and really opens up the gateway to China. Also is in dispute by the United States government and the British government. And Horace Delaney purchased it for gunpowder and glass beads from, and got his wife, James Delaney's mother, from the Native Americans there. So this is a point of contention for many of the players that I talked about earlier. It's worth something, and it has value, and it's strategically important. So the governments are very interested in it. So James Delaney, who went to Africa and was presumed lost at sea, returns for his father's funeral, makes a very public appearance. He does whisper in his father's ear before the burial that forgive him, for he has indeed sinned, and we will find out what those sins are. But really, the show is all about setting that foundation for the plot to develop and grow. And also, it was almost like the reunion show. We get to be introduced to a lot of friends and foes from his past, including the Delaney lawyer, who's been trying to buy the shipping company for years. And every time he makes an offer, Horace Delaney would send him a bag full of horse manure. You have the half-sister and angry brother. They were set to inherit the property, and they had actually negotiated a deal for the Nootka Sound property near Vancouver. They had actually negotiated that with the East India Company. You have the butler, who is the confidant of Horace Delaney, and also the older brother of James Delaney, who's been living in the house and taking care of the father when times are tough. You have this madam who somehow moved a whole brothel into the family warehouse, and it's obvious the shipping company had not been doing very well, or shipping anything, if she's able to set up a profitable brothel in the family warehouse and offices. And then you have this Delaney child and family that's been raising him, that's out in the rural areas, that nobody had anything to deal with and didn't care for him at all, and even acknowledge existence, really. And then the Lords of the East India Trading Company, that's the connection there is James actually was a cadet and served under the chairman of the East India Company, Sir Stuart Strange. So he is very well aware of Sir Stuart Strange's activities and what he can do, what he's capable of. So this show is all about Delaney entering London again and causing a stir, and then moving around all of these different players and really setting the table for the intrigue to come. Now, during the show, there's a lot of mysterious references and Easter eggs that we find, and I counted up. Well, I noticed about 12 of them, so I'm going to go through those. So stay tuned. It won't be too bad, but we're going to go through them here. And again, stick with me. It'll be kind of interesting. So let's see. For number one, we have rumors of his activities in Africa. There's a lot of rumors from the ship captains on the docks, the mariners that have heard of whatever James is doing in Africa, and there's a lot of stories out there. So we will find out what those are as the show unfolds. But we've heard one that his brother-in-law talked about. I didn't quite understand it. It almost was like a referral to cannibalism, but we'll find out. And certainly cannibalism and having sex with slaves in chains was kind of the charge. Number two, James tells others that he is dead and knows of the dead. When he has his father's body exhumed and they perform the autopsy, the physician was wondering if they should put the body deeper in the ground, and James comes up to him and grabs his face and holds it close and said he knows of the dead, and he will know if the physician or anyone in his profession have messed with the body. When he lets him go, finally the physician asks if any word should be said, and James says that no one is there. So he is keenly aware of the dead, and it'll be interesting to find out why. Number three, the madam who has moved into the Delaney warehouse, she, at the end of their confrontation, after he tells her to move out, she says that he makes girls disappear, and he doesn't deny it, and uses that to create fear in the madam and in the brothel. So we'll hopefully find out more about that as well. When James gets to the estate, the butler says he looks the same, but James replies that he is not. So obviously something happened to him in Africa, and he's not the same man. And who, after being involved in the shipwreck and God knows what in Africa, I probably wouldn't be the same person either. Number five, the butler gets on James when they're talking at the Delaney house that James never wrote. He never wrote his father. But James James knows all the deepest and darkest secrets, the things that only Horace and the butler talked about, that only the butler knew. But James knew everything, and he said he could hear his father calling to him. His father would go down to the shore of the river and build a fire and call to James in Africa. And James said he could hear him, and he knew that he was dead, and he knew he had to come back. And he had all this information. So how did he hear all that? It wasn't like you could just text somebody, and it wasn't even you could send a telegram. Information passed very slowly. It was usually ferried down there by courier, bounced down by sea captains and crew, and finally the news made it to far off places. And it was just a different time completely. But somehow he knew all of the deepest and darkest secrets that obviously Horace Delaney would never tell anyone. But he knew all this stuff, and he could hear him calling to him. How did that happen? The butler said that often his father would talk to ghosts in the fire, and it sounded like crows or ravens talking. So was he talking to James? Was he talking to spirits? We don't know. We'll find out. Number 6, James has visions of witch doctors or spirits when he has some downtime. He also sees the dead rising. He has these visions. Is it real? Is it not? He also saw his his father down by the water with the fire, and then the fog rolled in. It's like when he stops moving and lets his mind relax, that's when these visions pop into his brain. So he can see these spirits or things, and he actually does talk to the spirit in the morgue. The corpse that rose from the dead was coming for him, and said he had no fear to feed him, and he had work to do, and that corpse went away. So we'll find out what that's all about. Is he some kind of witch doctor or something? I'm not sure. At several points in the episode, this is number 7, James is walking along the river. There are also wild dogs that are along the river, and they feed on the flesh of people that commit suicide. They jump over the bridge, wash up on shore, and the dogs eat the meat. These are wild dogs, and they're tamed by no one. So the old man that's raising the young Delaney, he notices that this dog, this carrion dog, this wild dog, is following James and seems to heel and obey him. And he says it's witchcraft. He's never seen one of these wild dogs be tamed like this around a person. Is it some kind of witchcraft? So we'll find out. James certainly has a lot to him that others can't see. Probably one of the bigger things is number 8. There's some kind of a deep relationship between James and his sister, his half-sister. Her reaction when he comes in to the church, and then also her behavior in the bar, tells of something deeper. Also, James said that even though he went to Africa, he still loved her, and so there's something that's going on there. She does send him a letter that he reads at the very ending, the last scene of the episode, that says that she is happily married, and she underlines happily. So, and she hopes that whatever secrets they have are made buried very deep. So we'll find out what those secrets are as the show moves along. Number 9, someone poisoned Horace Delaney. Who did it? The butler? Was it the East India, an assassin from the East India Company? Was it the brother-in-law? Who knows? But somehow Horace Delaney was poisoned with arsenic. That was the point of exhuming the body and performing that autopsy. Number 10, we kind of touched on this earlier. James knows all about the political intrigue of the day. He knows the importance of Nootka Sound. He knows that the East India Company wants it really badly. He knows the king wants it really badly. But he knows all of the intrigue. He knows all of the details. He knows the U.S. and the British government are beginning peace negotiations. He knows, why they want that piece of land and lays it out. He knows that the lawyer wants the piece of land, and he said he should send him some horse dung, just like his father. So he knows all of this. And how does one know all this? I mean, it's almost on the level of being a spy, really. I don't understand how he knows all this, especially being in Africa for 10 years. And the East India Company lords thought that he wouldn't know this either, saying that, you've been in Africa and for 10 years and, we're at war with America. And he's like, I know all that. So we'll find out how he knows. Number 11, he knows the secrets of the lords of the East India Company. He knows Sir Stuart Strange, and he knows that these are evil men involved in conquest and plunder and rape and all of the evil things that they do. And, he's well aware of it. He was a corporal for an East India company, private military or private navy. He knows what they do, but he also seems to know each of them, and he kind of looks at each one during the conversation, that he knows each of them. And I think they were a little unsettled by it. They kind of laugh nervously at the end. But I thought it was interesting, too, how he behaved with some of these players, with the madam and the physician. He gets pretty physical with them. Grabs the physician by the face. He knocks over the table in the brothel. These with others, like the lawyer, his brother-in-law, and the lords, he does a lot of grunting. So he grunts a lot in this one. He does mumble and he grunts, and it's kind of funny. But I don't know if it's the character or if it's just episode 1, but we notice that he does grunt right before he kind of walks off and leaves them. So we'll see if that continues in future episodes. Just a difference in the way he treats them. And number 12, when he came ashore, he was rowed ashore, and he got on the horse, went on the top of the hill, and then buried something. Now, some people have said that he dug something up, like money or something, but I think he buried something. Whether it was a talisman or some kind of relic or something, some witchcraft thing, don't know. But he did bury something pretty deep at the top of the hill. So we'll find out what that is, I'm sure, during the show. Hopefully they come back around to that. So as you can see, there's a lot of intrigue with the show. The plot can go in a lot of directions. They built a solid foundation. It should be interesting to see where they take us on this journey. I think it's going to be pretty interesting. I'm sure it's going to get into some of the dark secrets of the lords and the elite. I mean, you could already see it in the pub scene when the sister-in-law and the brother-in-law, or the sister and the brother-in-law, leave, and James is kind of sitting there watching these people, and it's a funeral for his father, and these people are starting to drink heavily, and the girls are there, and it's starting to turn into something really strange and ugly. And I think as he moves along in this society, in this world, he'll see even more things. So stay tuned for that. We'll see where they take us. And I have to say that I'm attracted to this. I like this era. I've read a lot of books. The Patrick O'Brien Master and Commander books, and a bunch of other fiction and other books on a military history of this era. And it is pretty interesting, if you're a student of history, to read everything that was going on. There were a lot of battles, a lot of fighting, a lot of naval battles, a lot of things going on. So I think this is a really interesting time in the world's history. And at the same time, Hollywood has done their thing to it. And if you look at this episode, it's pretty interesting. It's really gritty and it's dirty. And if you look at other, like the Disney Pirates of the Caribbean series, or Horace Hornblower from BBC, or even Master and Commander, or The Patriot, or the George Washington miniseries, some of these things, I mean, they're really grit-free. They're not as dirty and rough, but you got to remember, it's 1814 in London. We have the primary fuel, coal and coke and wood, and those are used for heating and cooking all over London. So they had barges and ships and sloops just full of this coal and coke coming up up the Thames and being offloaded and delivered all over the city. And so you had ash, and you had soot, and you had dust, and you had smoke everywhere, and everything had just a grit on it, a coal gray, a dark gray grit. And you could kind of see that in the first episode, just the clothing and the costumes and just everything was kind of dirty and dingy. And I think, in my mind, that's how everything would be. Everything, even here in the United States, when we had steam engines in downtown areas where they were burning coal to fuel the boilers, and you had that plume of smoke, it would just get a covering of soot over everything. So I think it's more realistic that it is kind of gritty and dirty. So gotta hand it to the set creators and the costume folks. It is kind of interesting to see more of that gritty feel to it. And again, think about transportation back then. You had horses and carriages and people riding horses. It generates a lot of waste. And so things are dirty and dusty, and there's waste of all kinds in the streets. It was not clean like Pirates of the Caribbean, any stretch of the imagination. And sanitation and habits were just different back then. Modern for the time, but by today's comparison, it wasn't even close. And I think the characters reflect that too. Their teeth, their clothes, the hygiene. It's a different time, and people didn't take a shower or a bath every day. It was maybe once a year, so things are different. I was surprised that the lords of the East India Company were not wearing wigs, but maybe it wasn't a formal event where they needed to wear wigs. Maybe the chairman did. I'd have to look at that again. I did look at some of the other reviews of the show. And just wanted to talk about some of those for a minute. One of the reviews, one of the main complaints was that that it was kind of slow, with the plot and the characters. And for me, it's the first show. You're setting the stage. Everybody just needs to relax. The Aaron Rodgers relax, RELAX, relax. It's the first show. People need to chill. It's all going to come together. Things are really going to get rocking. Probably episode 2, maybe episode 3 or 4. So this isn't The Walking Dead where you're sitting in a farm for a whole season. I think things are going to get rolling pretty quickly. Another complaint was there's mumbling. And yes, Tom Hardy's character did mumble a lot. And it was hard to understand him at times. We had to, I watched it twice. And the second time I turned up the volume, and he does mumble a lot, and it is tough to understand. I do like the grunt, but he was enunciating better when he was with the Lords. But we'll see how that pans out. Maybe it's just acclimating to English. Maybe he was trying to acclimate his character to English society again. I don't know. We'll see. Some people were saying the darkness in the candle shots were tough to see things. I didn't mind it at all. I mean, you got to remember this is 1800s, and life was by candle and by lantern. It was dark back then. You have these great halls like the church, and they were sure you have candles, but they only get it so light. Gray days, rainy days, like it was in that funeral. You're going to have darkness in these large places. So didn't bother me at all. I think that's part of the story as well, in setting the mood. So no problem there at all. I thought it was all right. The language warning. This show is for mature audiences. I was a little surprised it dropped an F-bomb, an N-bomb on FX. It caught me by surprise, to be honest with you. I mean, we're not on HBO or Showtime or Cinemax or something like that. This is FX. Yes, it's cable, but it's FX, right? And it sure got my attention. It's a mature audiences show. I'm not complaining. It caught me by surprise. And same with the nudity there. I was surprised to see some, it wasn't full frontal, but I was surprised to see a little nudity there. And again, if it's a FX channel, not HBO, Cinemax, or Showtime. But those two things were a little surprising. But away we go. And others I've talked to, they were kind of surprised by that too. They were not expecting that. Overall, I enjoyed the show. I thought it was well done. It sets a solid foundation for where we're going. Some of the reviews I saw, they gave it B pluses. I'm not going to assign a rating to it. It had 3.4 million viewers, and it had really good demographics for that 18 to 49-year-old range. I think 1.4 million viewers in that range. A lot of men watched it. I like the time period, as I said, particularly the military history and the tall ships of that era. A lot of sea battles, a lot of things going on there. Life was certainly dangerous. Life was could be adventurous. It was an interesting era, and a lot of things were happening rapidly. So it's going to be interesting to see where the show goes from here. I'm going to be doing more podcasts on it. Hopefully this live stream thing, I figured everything out, and I'm looking forward to doing some more of these. It's kind of fun. It took me a couple times to figure out, but I'll listen to the quality here. I'm not doing it again. This would be the fourth time, and I'm not going to do that again. But it's kind of fun to do. So thank you for tuning in. More on Small Scale Life. We usually do. I have a weekly podcast there. I've done a lot of great interviews with different folks who are into health and fitness. I've talked to folks who are urban gardeners, started their own business and are basically farming in their backyard. I've talked to different folks all over the place. Charles Hugh Smith is an economist and philosopher. Talked with him about Mincome and the future of jobs and all kinds of things. So it's a lot of fun. Feel free to tune into those shows. I've got a bunch of episodes. I think there's 30 some episodes now. Between this and the Healthy Lifestyle Podcast, the Small Scale Life Podcast, and the Healthy Lifestyle Podcast. I'm not going to be doing many entertainment shows, but I am going to do this one. I think this is kind of interesting. I'd like to talk a little bit more about what's happening in 1814, what's happening in Britain, what's happening in the United States, what's happening with, what is this East India Company? Kind of do some talking about those because it's history and I really enjoy history. But feel free to tune in to Small Scale Life over there at the blog, smallscalelife.com. Check us out on Facebook. I'm active on Twitter. Also, Instagram has got a lot of good stuff there. YouTube, I am on Pinterest, and getting some other things going as well. So thanks for tuning in. The podcast itself is on the site. It's on Blueberry. Hosted on Blueberry, also through iTunes and Stitcher. And I'm going to start uploading here onto YouTube. So a lot of good things are happening with Small Scale Life this year. Really going to get it cranking. And thanks for tuning in. Remember to always continue to learn, do, and grow. This is Tom from the Small Scale Life Podcast. We'll check you next time. Thanks for tuning in.